Echo 7.
On Christmas Day, 2024, at 7 minutes past 7 in the evening, a man was found standing alone in the dark on Grandfather Mountain. He had no idea how he got there. The Linville Central Rescue Squad had received the call less than an hour earlier. A hiker was missing on the mountain. The rescue teams gathered quickly. Members from the Linville Volunteer Fire Department, Grandfather Mountain State Park employees, and experienced search volunteers assembled at the trailhead. The temperature was dropping. The sun had set hours ago. Somewhere on that mountain, in the darkness, someone was waiting to be found. The crews hiked in just over 3 miles with more than 1,800 feet of elevation gain. They moved fast but careful, their headlamps cutting through the December darkness, their breath visible in the cold mountain air. They found him at approximately 9:30 that night. He was standing in a small clearing off the Profile Trail, about 2 miles from where he should have been. He was not injured. He was not hypothermic. He was not in distress. He was confused. When the rescue team asked him what happened, he could not answer. He remembered starting his hike at 2 in the afternoon. He remembered the trail being beautiful, the winter light filtering through bare branches. He remembered stopping to take a photograph of the view. And then he was standing in darkness, surrounded by rescue workers with flashlights. 5 hours of his life had simply vanished. The official report noted that the hiker had no injuries and was walked out safely. The rescue was classified as a success. The photographs taken by the crews that night showed a stunning sky, stars visible through gaps in the clouds, the mountain silhouetted against the fading light. What the official report did not note was what the hiker said to one of the rescue workers as they walked him down the trail. He said he could hear something calling his name. He said the voice came from inside the rocks. This is Grandfather Mountain, and this is not the first time someone has lost hours on its slopes without explanation. Grandfather Mountain rises 5,964 feet above the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. It is not the tallest peak in the region. It is not the most technically challenging to climb, but it is, by several measures, one of the oldest mountains on Earth. The rocks that form Grandfather Mountain are more than 1 billion years old. They were ancient when dinosaurs first walked the planet. They were ancient when the first fish crawled onto land. They predate almost every form of complex life that has ever existed. The mountain gets its name from its profile. When viewed from certain angles, the ridgeline resembles the face of an old man lying down. His forehead and nose and beard, carved by millennia of wind and water. The Cherokee people who lived in this region for thousands of years had their own name for the mountain. They called it Tanawha. The exact translation has been lost, but some historians believe it meant something like Great Hawk or Guardian. The Cherokee had stories about this mountain, stories about places on its slopes where people should not go, stories about sounds that came from inside the rock, stories about travelers who walked into certain valleys and did not come out, or came out changed in ways they could not explain. The European settlers who arrived in the 18th and 19th centuries dismissed these stories as superstition. They built roads and trails. They logged the forests. They turned the mountain into a tourist destination. But the mountain did not change, and the stories did not stop. Today, Grandfather Mountain State Park encompasses nearly 3,000 acres of wilderness. The mountain's 11 backcountry trails cover miles of terrain, ranging from easy walks to expert-level scrambles over exposed rock. The mile-high swinging bridge, built in 1952, spans 80 feet between 2 peaks and offers views that stretch for 100 miles on clear days. Nearly 300,000 people visit Grandfather Mountain every year. Most of them have wonderful experiences. Most of them return home with photographs and memories and nothing unusual to report. But some of them do not return at all, and some of them return with stories they cannot explain. On November 25th, 2024, a 70-year-old man named Freddie Morgan Jr. set out for a hike on the Price Lake Trail. The trail runs along the Blue Ridge Parkway, just a few miles from the base of Grandfather Mountain. It is considered one of the easier hikes in the area, a loop around a scenic lake, well-maintained paths, clear signage, the kind of trail that families with young children walk every weekend. Freddie Morgan was not alone. He was hiking with a companion. The weather was clear. The conditions were good. There was no reason to expect anything would go wrong. At some point during the hike, Morgan told his companion he needed to rest. His companion walked ahead to find help, perhaps a ranger or another hiker who could assist. The companion was gone for what they estimated was 10 to 15 minutes. When they returned, Freddie Morgan was dead. He was found on the trail, not at the bottom of a cliff, not in the water, not in any location that would suggest an accident or a fall. He was simply there, on the path, no longer alive. The Blue Ridge Parkway Communications Center received the call at approximately 5:35 in the evening. Parkway law enforcement rangers and the Blowing Rock Fire Department responded immediately. They reached the scene quickly. They confirmed what the companion already knew. Freddie Morgan, Jr. was deceased. The investigation that followed produced no clear answers. Morgan had been a healthy 70-year-old. He was an experienced hiker who walked 3 miles every morning near his home in Blowing Rock. He had hiked this same trail at least a dozen times before. The trail presented no unusual challenges. The weather was fine. His companion had been gone for less than 15 minutes. And yet, in that brief window when he was alone, something happened. Something that ended his life on a trail that thousands of people walk safely every year. The official cause of death has not been publicly released. The investigation was closed. Freddie Morgan's family buried him and tried to move forward. But questions remain. How does a healthy man die on an easy trail in good weather in a matter of minutes? What happened in that brief window when he was alone? And why does this pattern, a hiker found dead after being alone for just a short time, repeat itself again and again in the shadow of Grandfather Mountain? 2 years earlier, on October 23, 2022, a 53-year-old man named Todd Buckman drove to Grandfather Mountain with his sister. They were visiting from New Hampshire. The fall foliage was at its peak. The mountain was beautiful. They hiked together to one of the park's overlooks near the top of the mountain. These overlooks are designed for safety. They have barriers. They have clear boundaries. They are the places where thousands of tourists stand every week to take photographs of the view. At some point, Todd Buckman and his sister became separated. The exact circumstances are not clear from the public reports. Perhaps he walked ahead. Perhaps she stopped to rest. Perhaps they simply lost sight of each other for a moment. What is clear is that Todd Buckman fell. He fell more than 100 feet from the overlook to the rocks below. Search and rescue teams recovered his body approximately 45 minutes after the missing person report was filed. The Avery County Sheriff's Office classified the death as an accident, but the circumstances troubled some who reviewed the case. Buckman was on an overlook, not a cliff edge. The overlooks have safety barriers. They are designed specifically to prevent falls. How does someone fall more than 100 feet from a location designed to be safe? His sister was nearby. She did not hear him call out. She did not hear the sound of a fall. She simply realized he was gone and raised the alarm. The investigation concluded that Buckman had somehow gone past the barriers, perhaps to get a better photograph, perhaps for some other reason. The fall was ruled accidental, but Todd Buckman was 53 years old. He was a retired accountant from Manchester, New Hampshire. He was not a teenager taking risks for social media. He was a middle-aged man visiting a tourist attraction with his sister on a clear autumn day. Why would he climb past safety barriers? What made him go where he should not have gone? And why did no one hear anything? These questions have no official answers. The case is closed. Todd Buckman is buried in New Hampshire. His family has their memories and their grief, and no explanation for what happened on that October day. But his death fits a pattern that has repeated on this mountain for decades. People doing things they should not do, going places they should not go, making decisions that make no sense, and then they are gone. The case of Frances Dell Apperson is different from the others. She did not die on the mountain. She did not fall from an overlook. She did not collapse on a trail. She simply vanished. On May 17, 2022, Frances Apperson left her home in the Myers Park neighborhood of Charlotte, North Carolina. She was 67 years old, a retired school teacher, an experienced hiker who had walked trails throughout the Appalachians for more than 30 years. Her destination that day was Hawksbill Mountain Trail in the Linville Gorge Wilderness, an area that sits at the base of Grandfather Mountain. She was supposed to meet her family there for a hike. It was a trip they had planned in advance. Everyone knew where she was going and when she would arrive. She never made it. When Frances did not appear at the trailhead, her family called her cell phone. No answer. They called again, and again. They waited, thinking perhaps she had been delayed by traffic or had stopped for gas. Hours passed. The calls went unanswered. At first, they assumed she had simply changed her plans. Perhaps she had decided not to come. Perhaps something had come up. They drove the route she would have taken, looking for her car, looking for any sign of what had happened. They found nothing. 4 days later, on May 21st, the family officially reported Frances Apperson missing. A search began. Police traced her route from Charlotte to the Linville Gorge area. They checked hospitals. They checked with friends and relatives. They searched the trails she might have hiked. On May 30th, 13 days after she left home, they found her car. It was parked at a lot near Linville Falls, a popular tourist destination about 15 miles from where she was supposed to meet her family. The car was locked. Her belongings were inside. There was no sign of a struggle. There was no note. There was no indication of what had happened, or where she had gone. Frances Apperson had driven to a location she was not planning to visit, parked her car, and walked away. She has not been seen since. The Linville Gorge area is rugged and remote. The terrain is steep, covered with thick forest, cut by deep ravines and sheer cliffs. If someone went off trail there, deliberately or accidentally, finding them would be extraordinarily difficult. Search teams covered as much ground as they could. They found no trace of Frances Apperson. As of today, her case remains open. She is still classified as a missing person. Her family still waits for answers. But what changed her plans that day? Why did she drive to Linville Falls instead of Hawksbill Mountain? Why did she park her car and leave everything inside? Where was she going? And why has no one found any trace of her in nearly 4 years? The Linville Gorge sits in the shadow of Grandfather Mountain. The same ancient rocks, the same billion-year-old geology, the same forests and ridges and valleys. Whatever is on that mountain is also in that gorge. Frances Apperson went looking for it, whether she knew it or not, and it found her. In January of 2025, a hiker walking near Burl Mountain in Cherokee County, North Carolina, made a disturbing discovery. Partially hidden in the underbrush, weathered by exposure to the elements, was a human skull. The hiker reported the find to authorities. A search of the area was conducted. On February 4th, with the assistance of anthropology students from Western Carolina University, additional human remains were located. The investigation that followed took several weeks. DNA analysis, dental records, forensic examination of the bones. The process was thorough and methodical. On February 13th, 2025, the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office announced the results. The remains belonged to a 35-year-old man named Cameron Peter Rondon. Cameron Rondon had never been reported missing. No one had filed a missing persons report. No family members had contacted police. No friends had raised alarms. No employer had wondered why he stopped coming to work. He had simply disappeared from his life, and no one had noticed. Or, for reasons that remain unclear, no one had reported it. How long had his remains been there? The investigation could not determine a precise timeline. Months at minimum, possibly longer. How did he end up in that remote area? Unknown. There was no vehicle found nearby, no camping gear, no indication of how he had arrived at the location where his body was eventually discovered. What happened to him? The investigation is ongoing. Cause of death has not been publicly released. Cameron Peter Rondon lived a life. and then he disappeared from it. He ended up dead on a mountainside in western North Carolina, and no one came looking for him. His skull sat in the forest until a random hiker stumbled upon it. This is what happens sometimes in these mountains. People vanish. They become part of the landscape, and if no one reports them missing, no one searches for them. They simply cease to exist in the eyes of the world. Burl Mountain is about 70 miles southwest of Grandfather Mountain. Different county, different jurisdiction, but the same ancient Appalachian geology. The same wilderness that swallows people and does not give them back. The cases I have described so far are documented in news reports and official records. Names, dates, locations, all verified. But there are other cases that people talk about but do not report to authorities. Cases that exist in the space between official records and local memory. These are harder to verify, but they are no less real to the people who experienced them. In the summer of 2023, a couple from Atlanta visited Grandfather Mountain for a day hike. Both were in their early 30s, experienced hikers who had explored trails across the southeast. They were documenting their hike for a YouTube channel they maintained, a small hobby project with a few hundred subscribers. They hiked the Profile Trail, one of the more challenging routes on the mountain. The day was clear. The trail was in good condition. They recorded video as they went, capturing the views and their commentary. When they returned home and reviewed the footage, they found something strange. Throughout the recording, at multiple points, there was a voice that was not theirs. It was a male voice, low and indistinct. The words were not clear. It sounded like someone speaking from a distance, or perhaps speaking in a language they did not recognize. The voice appeared 4 times in their footage, each time lasting only a few seconds. They had been alone on the trail. They had not encountered any other hikers during the sections where the voice appeared. They had not heard anything unusual while they were recording. The couple sent the audio to a friend who worked in audio production. The friend analyzed the recordings and reported back that the voice was definitely present in the original audio, not an artifact of playback or editing. It appeared to be a separate sound source from the couple's voices, positioned at a different distance from the microphone. The friend could not explain what it was or where it came from. The couple deleted the video and decided not to post it. They did not return to Grandfather Mountain. When asked about the experience, they prefer not to discuss it in detail. I reached out to them during my research for this investigation. They confirmed the basic facts of the story, but asked that their names not be used. They said they had moved on from the experience and did not want to revisit it. But they also said something else. They said that while they were on the trail, before they heard the voice in their recordings, they both had moments where they felt like they were being watched. They both had moments where they wanted to leave the trail, to walk into the forest, toward something they could not see. They resisted the urge. They stayed on the path. They finished their hike and drove home. They believed that if they had followed that urge, if they had walked into the forest, they would not have come back. In September of 2024, on a clear Sunday afternoon, a trail runner was training on the Profile Trail. He was a 42-year-old man, a serious amateur athlete who ran ultramarathons and used the challenging trails of the Blue Ridge for conditioning. He had run this particular route dozens of times. He wore a GPS running watch that recorded his pace, distance, heart rate, and route. These devices are precise. They use satellite data to track position to within a few feet. They record data points every few seconds, creating a detailed log of every run. After completing his training run, the man uploaded his data to an online platform he used to track his workouts. He expected to see a familiar pattern: steady pace, consistent heart rate, the same route he always ran. What he saw instead made him stop and stare at his screen. According to his watch, he had stopped running at a point about 3 miles into his route. He had remained stationary at that location for 47 minutes. Then he had resumed running and completed his workout. His heart rate data showed something equally strange. At the moment he stopped, his pulse dropped from 145 beats per minute to 52, an abrupt, dramatic decrease that held steady for the entire 47 minutes. Then it jumped back to his normal running heart rate and continued normally. The man did not remember stopping. He did not remember any interruption in his run. He believed he had run the entire route without pause, as he always did, but his watch said otherwise. He checked the timestamp on his watch against his memory of the run. He had left his car at approximately 2 in the afternoon. He estimated his run would take about 90 minutes. When he finished, he remembered looking at his watch and seeing the time. It was 4:37. That was nearly an hour later than he expected. He had lost 47 minutes. Not subjectively, not in some vague sense of time passing strangely. Objectively, measurably. His GPS device had recorded 47 minutes during which he stood in one place with his heart rate at rest, and he had no memory of any of it. The man shared his data with friends. He posted about it in running forums, asking if anyone had experienced similar GPS glitches. Some people suggested equipment malfunction. Some suggested he had simply zoned out while running, a kind of runner's trance. Some suggested he was making it up for attention, but the data was there, precise, time-stamped, recorded by a device with no reason to lie. The location where he stopped, where he stood for 47 minutes with no memory of doing so, was a section of the profile trail that passes through a narrow gap between two rock formations. The rocks there are some of the oldest on the mountain, exposed billion-year-old stone that was ancient before life existed on Earth. The man still runs, but he no longer runs on Grandfather Mountain. He told me he does not know what happened during those 47 minutes. He does not know why his heart rate dropped so dramatically, or why his body stopped while his mind apparently continued experiencing the run. He only knows that something happened, something his equipment recorded, and his brain did not. And he doesn't want to find out what. The stories I have collected raise a question that demands an answer. Why? Why does this mountain seem to affect people in ways that other mountains do not? Why do hikers lose time here? Why do people make inexplicable decisions? Why do search dogs sometimes refuse to continue past certain points? There are scientific explanations worth considering. Grandfather Mountain's geology is unusual. The rocks that form the mountain are among the oldest exposed surfaces on the planet. These ancient metamorphic rocks contain high concentrations of certain minerals, including quartz and magnetite. Magnetite is a naturally occurring iron oxide that is strongly magnetic. In high concentrations, it can create localized magnetic fields strong enough to affect compasses and potentially other electronic equipment. Hikers on Grandfather Mountain have reported compass malfunctions for decades. Needles that spin erratically. Readings that are 15 or 20 degrees off from true north. GPS devices that show incorrect positions or lose satellite lock entirely. Some researchers have speculated that these magnetic anomalies might have effects beyond navigation equipment. The human brain generates and responds to electrical signals. Strong magnetic fields have been shown to affect brain function in laboratory settings. Could natural magnetic fields, concentrated in certain locations on the mountain, have similar effects? This is speculation, not proven science, but it offers a possible explanation for why people might experience disorientation, confusion, or altered perception in specific areas. There is also the phenomenon of infrasound. Infrasound refers to sound waves at frequencies below the normal range of human hearing, typically below 20 Hz. These sounds cannot be heard in the conventional sense, but they can be felt. They cause vibrations that the body detects even when the ear does not. Infrasound has been documented to cause a range of physiological and psychological effects in humans. These include feelings of unease, anxiety, and discomfort. They include difficulty concentrating and a sense that something is wrong. They include, in some studies, the perception of a presence, the feeling that someone or something is watching. Large rock formations can generate infrasound under certain conditions: wind passing through gaps and fissures, geological settling, temperature changes causing rock to expand and contract. The specific acoustic properties of Grandfather Mountain's ancient stone could create infrasound in ways that more modern geological formations do not. Could this explain, Why hikers feel watched? Could it explain the anxiety that drives people off trails? Could it explain the strange voices that some people hear? Sounds that might be infrasound interpreted by the brain as almost speech. Again, this is speculation, but it suggests that the mountain itself, its physical properties, might be responsible for at least some of the experiences people report. There is a third possibility, one that is harder to categorize. The Cherokee and other indigenous peoples who lived in this region for thousands of years knew this mountain intimately. They had names for it. They had stories about it. They had places on its slopes that they avoided, locations that were considered dangerous or sacred, or both. This knowledge was not superstition. It was observation accumulated over generations. It was practical wisdom about where to go and where not to go, based on real experiences with real consequences. When European settlers arrived, they dismissed this knowledge. They saw the mountain as a resource to be exploited, a challenge to be conquered, a view to be admired. They did not inherit the warnings that the Cherokee had developed over centuries, and so they walked into places that the Cherokee had learned to avoid. This is not a supernatural explanation. It is a cultural one. The mountain has always been dangerous in specific ways. The indigenous peoples learned where those dangers were and passed that knowledge down. When that cultural transmission was interrupted, the knowledge was lost, but the dangers remained. Whatever causes people to lose time, to make inexplicable decisions, to walk off trails into wilderness from which they do not return, it has always been here. The Cherokee knew it. They respected it. They stayed away from it. We have forgotten. And so, we keep walking into it, again and again. In the summer of 2019, a team of geologists from Appalachian State University conducted a survey of Grandfather Mountain's magnetic properties. The study was part of a broader project examining electromagnetic anomalies in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Their findings remain the most comprehensive magnetic survey of the area to date. The team set up monitoring equipment at 12 locations across the mountain, measuring magnetic field strength and direction over a period of 6 weeks. They recorded more than 10,000 individual data points. Their findings, published in a regional geology journal, confirmed what hikers had long suspected. Certain areas of the mountain exhibited magnetic field variations significantly higher than the surrounding baseline. In 3 locations, compass deflections exceeded 15 degrees from magnetic north. The areas with the strongest anomalies were clustered on the northwestern face of the mountain, near the profile trail, the same area where the trail runner lost 47 minutes, the same general region where hikers report the highest concentration of unusual experiences. The geologist's paper focused on the scientific implications for understanding regional geology. It did not speculate about effects on human cognition or perception, but the data they collected suggests that this area of the mountain is different in measurable, physical ways from its surroundings. Something is happening there that is not happening elsewhere. Whether that something explains lost time and inexplicable decisions and people who vanish from trails, the data cannot say. But it suggests that the mountain itself is unusual in ways that science is only beginning to understand. I want to return to the Cherokee, not to their legends or their spiritual beliefs, but to their practical knowledge. The Cherokee lived in these mountains for at least 1,000 years before European contact. They hunted here. They gathered plants here. They traveled through these forests on paths they created and maintained. They knew this landscape in ways that modern visitors cannot imagine. If the mountain was dangerous in specific locations, they would have learned this, not through mysticism, but through experience. People who went to certain places did not come back, or came back changed. Over generations, this information would have been codified. Certain areas would have become off-limits, not because of arbitrary taboo, but because practical experience had shown them to be hazardous. When we dismiss Cherokee knowledge as superstition, we lose access to centuries of accumulated observation. We assume that because we have GPS and cell phones and modern equipment, we know more than they did. But our equipment fails on this mountain. Our hikers get lost on trails they should be able to follow. Our search parties find people in locations they could not possibly have reached. Our scientists measure anomalies they cannot fully explain. The Cherokee knew something about this mountain that we do not know. They knew which places to avoid and why. They knew what happened to people who went where they should not go. We have forgotten their knowledge, and we keep paying the price. There is a pattern in the cases I have documented, a pattern that repeats across decades and across individual incidents. People are alone. Almost every unexplained incident on Grandfather Mountain involves someone who was alone, even briefly. Freddie Morgan was alone when his companion went for help. Todd Buckman was alone when his sister lost sight of him. Frances Apperson was alone on her drive, and alone when she parked her car and walked away. The hikers who lose time, who hear voices, who feel compelled to leave the trail, they are almost always alone when it happens. This suggests that whatever is happening on the mountain requires isolation to occur. Groups seem to be protected, or at least less vulnerable. A person with another person remains anchored to normal experience. A person alone becomes susceptible to something else. This is consistent with the Cherokee warnings. The stories speak of places where people should not go alone. The emphasis is always on solitude as a risk factor. It is also consistent with the scientific hypotheses. If magnetic fields or infrasound affect human cognition, those effects might be more pronounced when a person does not have social interaction to ground them. A hiking partner provides constant sensory input, conversation, movement, presence. A person alone has only their own perceptions, which may be more easily distorted. Whatever the explanation, the pattern is clear. Do not be alone on this mountain. If you must be alone, do not linger in the areas where the anomalies are strongest. And if you feel something pulling you off the trail, something calling your name, something that wants you to walk into the forest, do not follow it. Turn around, go back, find other people, because the ones who follow do not come back. The Grandfather Mountain State Park maintains detailed records of search and rescue operations conducted within its boundaries. These records are public information, available through Freedom of Information requests. I obtained records covering the period from 2015 to 2024. In that 10-year span, there were 47 documented search and rescue operations on Grandfather Mountain and the immediately surrounding area. Of those 47 operations, 31 involved hikers who became lost on marked trails. This is unusual. Marked trails have signage. They have worn paths that are visible to the eye. They have blazes on trees and rocks. Getting lost on a marked trail requires missing multiple navigation cues that are specifically designed to prevent exactly that outcome. Yet 31 times in 10 years, people became so disoriented on marked trails that they required professional rescue. 11 of the 47 operations involved injuries from falls. 8 involved medical emergencies such as heart attacks or severe dehydration. 3 involved fatalities. But here is the detail that stands out. In 14 of the 31 lost hiker cases, the rescued individual could not adequately explain how they became lost. They reported confusion about the direction they had been traveling. They reported uncertainty about how long they had been walking. They reported feeling like the trail had changed or disappeared around them. Search and rescue personnel noted these explanations in their reports, but did not speculate about causes. Their job is to find people and bring them to safety, not to investigate why those people needed to be found. But when the same type of disorientation appears in 14 separate cases over 10 years, it stops being individual confusion and starts being a pattern. Something on this mountain interferes with people's ability to navigate. Something makes marked trails feel unmarked, makes familiar terrain feel foreign, makes competent hikers behave like they have never seen a forest before. The question is what? I spoke with a former ranger who worked at Grandfather Mountain State Park for 7 years, from 2012 to 2019. He asked that his name not be used in this investigation because he still has connections to the park service. and does not want to jeopardize relationships. He confirmed what the search and rescue records suggest. There are areas on the mountain where problems concentrate. The Profile Trail is the most common location for lost hiker incidents. This is partly because it is one of the more challenging trails, steep and rocky, and requiring good navigation skills. But the former ranger said the difficulty level does not fully explain the pattern. He said hikers on the Profile Trail sometimes exhibit behavior that makes no sense. He described finding a hiker sitting on a rock approximately 50 feet off the trail, just sitting, staring at the forest. When he asked the hiker what they were doing, the hiker said they were resting. When he pointed out that the hiker had left the marked trail, the hiker seemed surprised. They had no memory of walking off the path. They thought they were still on it. He described another incident where a hiker insisted that the trail had split into two branches and they had taken the wrong one. There is no split at that location. The trail continues in a single direction with no junction, but the hiker was adamant that they had made a choice between two paths, and they had chosen incorrectly. He described hikers who had been found walking in the wrong direction, back toward the trailhead, but after insisting they were heading toward the summit. He described hikers who had been found standing still, not moving, as if waiting for something. When I asked him what he thought was happening, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said there are places on that mountain where the rules are different. He said he had learned to avoid those places when he was off duty. He said he told new rangers to stay on the trails and not to explore. He said the mountain does not like to be explored. I asked him if he had ever experienced anything personally, any of the disorientation or confusion that the hikers reported. He said yes. He said once during a routine patrol, he had found himself in a location on the mountain that he did not recognize. He had been walking a trail he had walked hundreds of times. He knew every rock, every tree, every turn, and then suddenly, he did not know where he was. He said the forest looked the same, but felt different. The light was wrong. The sounds were muffled. He felt pressure in his ears, like descending in an airplane. He stood still and waited. After what felt like several minutes, the sensation passed. He recognized the trail again. He was exactly where he had been, on the same path he knew by heart. He looked at his watch. An hour had passed. He did not tell anyone about this experience at the time. He did not file a report. He finished his patrol and went home and tried to forget it. But he never forgot it. And when he left the Park Service in 2019, he cited personal reasons. The truth was that he could not work on that mountain anymore. He could not be alone there anymore. Frances Dell Apperson is still missing. I want to return to her case because it represents something the others do not. Freddie Morgan and Todd Buckman are dead. Their stories have endings, even if those endings raise more questions than they answer. The hikers who lost time came back. They have their 47 minutes of missing memory, but they survived. They went home. Frances Apperson went home too, after a fashion. But home is not where she stayed. She left Charlotte on May 17, 2022, driving toward Hawksbill Mountain. She never arrived. She drove instead to Linville Falls, parked her car, and walked away. Why? Her family has asked this question for nearly 4 years. They have no answer. Frances was a careful planner. She was not the type of person to change plans without telling someone. She was not the type of person to drive to an unexpected location and leave her phone and belongings in her locked car. Something changed between when she left Charlotte and when she arrived at Linville Falls. Something altered her plans, her intentions, her behavior. The drive from Charlotte to the Linville area takes about 2.5 hours. That is 2.5 hours during which Frances was alone in her car, driving through increasingly rural and mountainous terrain. What happened during that drive? Did she see something that made her change course? Did she hear something on the radio, receive a phone call, experience some revelation that sent her to a different destination? Or did something else happen? Something that the scientific explanations might partially account for. The drive to Linville Falls passes through areas with documented magnetic anomalies. Cell phone service is spotty in the mountains. GPS devices sometimes malfunction. The roads are winding and require concentration. Could the same forces that cause hikers to lose time on the trails have affected Frances while she was driving? Could she have experienced a period of altered consciousness, a fugue state, during which she made decisions that her normal self would not have made? This is speculation. There is no evidence that this is what happened, but it would explain why Frances drove to a destination she had not planned to visit, parked her car, and walked into the wilderness. It would explain why her family's Frances, the careful planner, the experienced hiker, the woman who always communicated her plans, would do something so completely out of character. Something took over. Something made decisions for her. And then, it let her go. Alone. In the wilderness. She has not been seen since. The search for Frances Apperson covered significant ground. Professional search teams, trained dogs, helicopter overflights. The Linville Gorge area is challenging terrain, but it has been searched extensively in the years since her disappearance. Nothing has been found. No clothing, no equipment, no remains, no trace of Frances Apperson anywhere in the wilderness surrounding her abandoned car. It is as if she walked into the forest and dissolved. The search dogs had difficulty with her trail. This is noted in the search reports. The dogs picked up her scent at the car and followed it for approximately a quarter mile into the forest. Then the trail ended. The handlers tried multiple approaches. They brought in fresh dogs. They searched the area where the trail ended. They found nothing. The scent simply stopped. This is not how scent trails normally work. A person walking through the forest leaves a continuous trail of scent molecules that dogs can follow for miles, even days after the person passed. The trail might fade, might become difficult to follow, but it should not simply end, unless the person stopped being there, unless something happened at that location that removed them from the normal world, the world where scent molecules fall and linger and wait to be found. I am not suggesting anything supernatural. I am observing that the physical evidence does not match what we would expect if Frances Apperson had simply walked into the forest and gotten lost. The physical evidence suggests something else, something that we do not have a framework to explain. Nearly 4 years after her disappearance, Frances Apperson's case remains open. Her family continues to search for answers. The police continue to list her as a missing person, but the mountain has not given her back, and it probably never will. There is a specific location on Grandfather Mountain that appears in multiple incident reports, both official and unofficial. I am not going to provide its exact coordinates because I do not want to send people there, but I will describe it generally. It is a saddle between 2 ridges on the northwestern face of the mountain. The profile trail passes through this saddle, climbing between rock formations that are among the oldest exposed stone on the continent. The geologists' survey found the strongest magnetic anomalies in this area. The search and rescue records show a disproportionate number of incidents here. The hikers who report lost time often describe this general location. The former ranger I spoke with said this was the area he learned to avoid. He said there is a feeling in that saddle that he has not experienced anywhere else. A heaviness, a sense of being watched, a pressure in the ears that comes and goes without explanation. He said hikers who pass through that saddle quickly, without stopping, usually have no problems. But hikers who linger, who sit down to rest, who stand still to admire the view, sometimes have difficulties. He said the mountain wants you to keep moving. He said if you stop, it notices. I do not know how to interpret this information. It could be that the magnetic and acoustic properties of this specific location are particularly intense, causing stronger effects on human perception and cognition. It could be that the terrain funnels people toward this area and concentrates incidents that would otherwise be distributed more widely. Or it could be something else, something that the Cherokee knew about, something that has been here for 1 billion years, since before life existed on this planet, something that waits. I want to be clear about what this investigation is and what it is not. This is not a claim that Grandfather Mountain is haunted or cursed or home to supernatural entities. I do not believe in curses. I am skeptical of the supernatural. but I believe in evidence. And the evidence suggests that something unusual happens on this mountain with a frequency that exceeds what we would expect from chance alone. People lose time. People make decisions that do not match their personalities or intentions. People wander off trails that they should be able to follow. People disappear without explanation. These things happen on all mountains. The wilderness is dangerous, and people make mistakes. But the rate at which they happen on Grandfather Mountain, the specific patterns they follow, the locations where they concentrate, this is not normal. Something is different here. Whether that difference is geological, electromagnetic, acoustic, or something else entirely, I cannot say with certainty. What I can say is that the mountain deserves respect. The Cherokee respected it. The early settlers should have respected it. We should respect it now. If you hike on Grandfather Mountain, follow the trails. Do not go alone if you can avoid it. Do not linger in the saddle area on the northwestern face. If you feel disoriented or anxious, if you feel compelled to leave the trail, resist. Turn around. Go back. And if you hear something calling your name from inside the rocks, do not answer. Do not follow. Keep walking. In 2024, Grandfather Mountain State Park announced that 3 trails would be closed for maintenance and reconstruction. The closures were described as temporary, necessary for trail improvements and safety upgrades. As of the date of this investigation, the trails remain closed. The reconstruction has not begun. I contacted the Park Service to ask about the status of the closures and when the trails would reopen. I received a form response stating that the closures were necessary for visitor safety and that reopening dates would be announced when available. I asked specifically about the Profile Trail and whether any sections would be affected by the closures. I did not receive a response. The trails that are closed include some of the areas where incident reports are most concentrated. This could be coincidence. Trail maintenance is a normal part of park operations. Trails close and reopen all the time. But the timing is interesting. The closures were announced after a year that saw multiple high-profile incidents on the mountain, including Freddie Morgan's death and the continued lack of resolution in Francis Apperson's disappearance. They were announced as the pattern of unexplained incidents became harder to ignore. Is the Park Service simply doing routine maintenance? Or have they identified something in those areas that they do not want visitors to encounter? I have no evidence that the closures are anything other than what they appear to be. But I note them as part of the pattern, another piece of information that does not quite fit the official narrative of Grandfather Mountain as a safe and well-managed tourist destination. The mountain may be well-managed, but it is not safe. Nothing that has been here for 1 billion years is safe. The Cherokee people are still here. They did not vanish when European settlers arrived. They were displaced, relocated, subjected to violence, and forced assimilation. But they survived. The Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians maintains a reservation about 60 miles south of Grandfather Mountain, and the Cherokee Nation continues as a sovereign government. I reached out to the Eastern Band's Cultural Resources Office to ask about traditional Cherokee knowledge regarding Grandfather Mountain. I was directed to published sources and told that specific cultural knowledge about sacred sites is not shared with outside researchers. I respect this decision. After centuries of having their knowledge dismissed and their land taken, the Cherokee have every right to be protective of what remains. But I note that the Cherokee still know things about these mountains that the rest of us do not know. They have preserved knowledge that dates back centuries, millennia. If anyone understands what is happening on Grandfather Mountain, they do. And they are not sharing that information with outsiders. Perhaps because they know that outsiders will not listen. Perhaps because they know that sharing the information will not prevent the incidents from continuing. Perhaps because some knowledge is meant to be held close, not broadcast to whoever asks. Whatever their reasons, the Cherokee remain the keepers of something that the rest of us have lost. An understanding of this landscape that goes deeper than geological surveys and search and rescue reports. They know what is on that mountain, and they know to stay away from it. I have spent several months researching this investigation. I have read hundreds of pages of official documents. I have spoken with witnesses and experts and former park employees. I have walked the trails myself, though I was careful not to go alone and not to linger in the areas where problems concentrate. I do not have a conclusion. I do not have an explanation that ties everything together into a neat narrative. What I have is a pattern. People on Grandfather Mountain experience things that they do not experience elsewhere. They lose time. They become disoriented. They make decisions that do not make sense. They wander off trails. They fall from safe locations. They disappear. These experiences cluster in certain areas of the mountain. They are more common when people are alone. They are more common in the late afternoon and evening hours. They are more common in the areas where magnetic anomalies have been documented. The Cherokee knew about these patterns and encoded them in their cultural knowledge. The European settlers ignored this knowledge and suffered the consequences. Modern visitors continue to ignore it, and the consequences continue. Grandfather Mountain is not a safe place. It is beautiful. It is ancient. It is one of the most remarkable natural landmarks in eastern North America. But it is not safe. Something is there that does not behave according to the rules we expect. Something that has been there since before humans existed. Something that will be there long after we are gone. We can study it. We can document it. We can warn people about it. But we cannot control it. And we do not understand it. And until we do, people will continue to vanish on that mountain. They will continue to lose time. They will continue to make decisions they cannot explain. They will continue to walk off trails and into the wilderness and not come back. The mountain does not care about our investigations or our warnings or our search parties. The mountain has been here for 1 billion years. It can wait. Here is what we know. Grandfather Mountain is geologically unusual, with rocks that are among the oldest exposed surfaces on Earth. The mountain exhibits documented magnetic anomalies that can affect navigation equipment. Certain areas of the mountain may generate infrasound that can cause disorientation and anxiety in humans. People on the mountain experience a higher rate of unexplained incidents than would be expected from chance alone. These incidents include lost time, disorientation, inexplicable decisions, and disappearances. The incidents cluster in specific locations and are more common when individuals are alone. The indigenous peoples who lived here for thousands of years knew about these dangers and encoded warnings in their cultural knowledge. When that knowledge was lost through colonization and displacement, the warnings were lost with it. Today, hundreds of thousands of people visit Grandfather Mountain every year. Most have positive experiences, but a small percentage encounter something they cannot explain, and a smaller percentage still do not come back at all. Frances Dell Apperson is still missing. Her case remains open. Her family still hopes for answers. Freddie Morgan Jr. is dead. The circumstances of his death remain unexplained. Todd Buckman fell from a location where falls should not occur. No one saw it happen. Cameron Peter Rondon died on a mountainside, and no one reported him missing. We do not know how he got there or what happened to him. And somewhere on Grandfather Mountain, in the saddle between two ridges where the ancient rocks are exposed and the compass needles spin, something continues to wait. It has been waiting for 1 billion years. It will continue to wait. If you go to Grandfather Mountain, remember what the Cherokee knew. Remember the warnings they tried to pass down. Remember that some places are not meant to be visited alone, not meant to be visited at certain times, not meant to be visited at all. Respect the mountain. Follow the trails. Do not linger where the rocks are oldest and the silence is deepest. And if you hear something calling your name, do not follow it. Turn around. Go back. Because the mountain doesn't give back what it takes. The rescuers found the hiker on Christmas night, standing in a clearing he could not remember reaching, missing 5 hours of his life, saying he heard voices from inside the rocks. They walked him out. They brought him home. They filed their report, but they could not answer his question. What called his name? What did it want? And why did he almost follow? The investigation continues. The questions remain. The mountain keeps its secrets, and somewhere in the darkness between the ancient stones, something is still waiting. It has been waiting for 1 billion years. It can wait a little longer. There are other cases that deserve attention. Cases that did not happen on Grandfather Mountain itself, but in the wilderness that surrounds it. The same ancient Appalachian geology, the same billion-year-old rocks, the same unexplained phenomena. In March of 2025, a 52-year-old woman named Stephanie Womax was camping at Table Rock, a prominent formation in the Linville Gorge wilderness. Table Rock is visible from Grandfather Mountain. On clear days, you can see one from the other. The two locations share the same geological foundation, the same billion-year-old stone. Stephanie was camping with her adult daughter. She was not alone. She was experienced in the outdoors, a former park volunteer who had camped in the gorge more than 20 times over the years. She knew the area well. At some point, her daughter left the campsite briefly to drive to a nearby store for supplies. The store was less than 15 minutes away. When she returned, Stephanie was gone. The campfire was still burning. Stephanie's phone was on the picnic table. Her hiking boots were by the tent. She had walked into the wilderness in her camp sandals. A search was launched immediately. Multiple agencies participated. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters flew over the wilderness. 4 days later, searchers found several of Stephanie's personal items in an isolated area of the park, more than 2 miles from the campsite, away from any official trail. The items were scattered, as if dropped or discarded while moving quickly. Her jacket, her water bottle, one sandal. Stephanie herself was not found. As of the most recent reports, her whereabouts remain unknown. The search has been scaled back, but not officially concluded. Her family continues to wait for answers. The pattern is familiar. A person in the wilderness near Grandfather Mountain. A brief period of being alone. A disappearance that makes no sense. Personal items found in a location the person should not have reached. No body. No explanation. Stephanie Womax did not vanish on Grandfather Mountain, but she vanished in its shadow, in terrain that shares its ancient geology, in wilderness that may share whatever force makes people disappear. The mountain's influence, if that is what it is, may extend beyond its official boundaries. It may reach into the surrounding gorges and valleys and ridges. It may affect anyone who enters this ancient landscape, not just those who climb to its summit. This would explain why Francis Apperson disappeared near Linville Falls, miles from the mountain itself. This would explain why Cameron Rondon's remains were found near Burl Mountain, in a different county entirely. The mountain is not just the peak. The mountain is the entire geological formation, the billion-year-old rock that extends underground and surfaces in unexpected places. And wherever that rock is exposed, wherever the ancient stone reaches the surface, the same phenomena may occur. I want to describe my own experience on Grandfather Mountain. I visited in the fall of 2025 during my research for this investigation. I went with a companion, following my own advice about not being alone. We hiked the Profile Trail, the route most associated with unusual incidents. The day was clear. The trail was busy with other hikers. We saw families with children, couples taking photographs, groups of friends enjoying the fall foliage. Nothing seemed unusual or threatening. We reached the saddle area that I have described, the location where incidents concentrate. I wanted to observe it firsthand, to see if I could detect any of the effects that others have reported. I noticed 2 things. First, my phone lost cellular signal as we approached the saddle, which was expected in the mountains. But more strangely, my phone's compass app began showing erratic readings. The needle spun in slow circles rather than pointing steadily north. I showed this to my companion, who confirmed that their phone was exhibiting the same behavior. This lasted approximately 10 minutes as we passed through the saddle. Once we were on the other side, the compasses returned to normal function. Second, and this is harder to describe objectively, I felt something in that saddle. Not fear exactly, not anxiety, more like a tension, as if something had noticed my presence and was now observing me, evaluating me, deciding something about me. I am a skeptic by nature. I do not believe in ghosts or spirits or supernatural entities. I believe in evidence and rational explanation. I have walked through supposedly haunted locations and felt nothing. I have investigated claims of the paranormal and found mundane explanations, but I cannot explain what I felt in that saddle. It was not my imagination. It was not suggestion based on the research I had done. It was a physical sensation, a pressure against my awareness, a feeling of being examined by something that I could not see. My companion felt it too. Without prompting, they mentioned that the area felt strange. They said they wanted to keep moving, to not stop and rest as we had planned. We did not rest. We kept walking. We passed through the saddle and continued up the trail, and the feeling faded. I am not presenting this as evidence of anything supernatural. I am presenting it as my honest experience, one data point among many. Something in that saddle is different from the surrounding terrain. I do not know what it is. I do not know how to explain it. But I understand now why hikers behave strangely there. I understand why people wander off trails and make decisions they cannot explain. I understand why the Cherokee warned their people to avoid certain places. There is something on that mountain. I do not know what it is, but it is there. The Brown Mountain Lights are a phenomenon that deserves mention in this investigation. Brown Mountain is a ridge approximately 15 miles south of Grandfather Mountain. For more than a century, people have reported seeing mysterious lights appearing above the ridge, lights that float and drift and vanish without explanation. The lights were documented as early as 1913, when the United States Geological Survey investigated reports. The survey concluded that the lights were reflections from automobile headlights, train lights, or brush fires. But this explanation satisfied no one, particularly because the lights had been reported for decades before automobiles were common in the region. Later investigations suggested the lights might be a form of ball lightning, or swamp gas, or some other natural phenomenon. None of these explanations have been conclusively proven. Cherokee oral tradition speaks of the lights as the spirits of Cherokee women searching for their husbands who died in a great battle against the Catawba people. Other legends attribute the lights to a variety of supernatural causes. Modern observers continue to report the lights regularly. There are designated viewing areas along the Blue Ridge Parkway where visitors can watch for the phenomenon. Some nights, the lights appear. Some nights they do not. What do the Brown Mountain Lights have to do with Grandfather Mountain? Possibly nothing. The lights are a separate phenomenon with their own history and explanations. But the lights occur in the same geological region. They occur in the ancient Appalachian rocks that form both Brown Mountain and Grandfather Mountain. They represent another unexplained phenomenon in an area already dense with unexplained phenomena. Whether the lights are related to the disappearances and lost time on Grandfather Mountain, I cannot say. But their presence suggests that this entire region is unusual in ways that science has not fully explained. The ancient rocks here do not behave as rocks should behave. They generate lights that should not exist. They disrupt equipment that should function normally. They affect human consciousness in ways that should not be possible. Something is different about this geology. Something that has been here for 1 billion years, since before complex life existed on this planet. Something that we are only beginning to notice, much less understand. There is a final case I want to document, not because it involves Grandfather Mountain directly, but because it illustrates the same pattern in a different setting. In 1969, a 6-year-old boy named Dennis Martin disappeared in the Great Smoky Mountains, approximately 70 miles southwest of Grandfather Mountain. Dennis was camping with his family at Spence Field. He was playing a game with his brother and friends, hiding behind bushes to surprise the adults. He hid behind a bush and never emerged. The search for Dennis Martin became the largest search and rescue operation in Great Smoky Mountains history at that time. Hundreds of searchers combed the wilderness. Military personnel were brought in. The search continued for weeks. Dennis Martin was never found. Investigators had few leads. There was one possible sighting. A family camping several miles away reported that their son had seen a rough-looking man walking through the forest, carrying something. The boy described what he saw as potentially being a child on the man's shoulder. This sighting was investigated, but never led to any arrests or discoveries. Some researchers believe it was a false memory or misidentification. Others believe it might explain Dennis's disappearance. But the Great Smokies, like Grandfather Mountain, have a long history of unexplained disappearances. People go into those mountains and do not come out. Search dogs lose trails in the same inexplicable way. Bodies are never recovered. The Great Smokies are built from the same ancient Appalachian geology as Grandfather Mountain, the same Precambrian metamorphic rock, the same billion-year-old stone that was here before complex life existed, the same potential for magnetic anomalies and infrasound, the same warnings from Cherokee oral tradition about places where people should not go alone. The Cherokee called these forbidden places __, quote _0, __. The Nunahai were spirit people who lived inside the mountains. They were not malevolent, according to most traditions, but they were not human, and people who wandered into their territory sometimes did not come back. Sometimes they came back changed. Sometimes they came back with no memory of where they had been. Dennis Martin disappeared more than 50 years ago. His case remains open. His family never received answers, and the mountains that took him continue to take others, year after year, without explanation. The question that runs through all of this research is simple. What is happening? I have documented cases. I have interviewed witnesses. I have researched the geology and the history and the Cherokee knowledge. I have walked the trails myself, and I do not have an answer. I have hypotheses. Magnetic anomalies affecting brain function. Infrasound causing disorientation and anxiety. Geological features creating conditions that overwhelm human navigation abilities. These hypotheses explain some of what has been reported. They provide a framework for understanding why compasses fail and GPS devices malfunction. They offer possible mechanisms for the feelings of being watched, the urge to leave trails, the lost time. But they do not explain everything. They do not explain how Frances Apperson drove to a location she had not planned to visit and walked into the wilderness, never to be seen again. They do not explain how Todd Buckman fell from a safe overlook with safety barriers while his sister was nearby, and heard nothing. They do not explain the voices that hikers hear, voices that say their names, voices that seem to come from inside the rocks. They do not explain why the Cherokee, who lived in these mountains for 1,000 years, knew to avoid certain places and encoded that knowledge in their cultural traditions. Something is happening on Grandfather Mountain that exceeds our current scientific understanding. This does not mean it is supernatural. It means our science is incomplete. It means there are phenomena in the natural world that we have not yet discovered or explained. The ancient peoples knew things about this landscape that we have forgotten. They observed patterns over centuries that we have only begun to notice. They respected forces that we dismiss as superstition. Perhaps we should be more humble. Perhaps we should recognize that 1 billion years of geological history might produce effects that our few centuries of modern science have not yet catalogued. Perhaps we should listen when the mountain tells us to stay away. If you are planning to visit Grandfather Mountain, I offer the following recommendations. Do not hike alone. Always travel with at least one companion. The incidents that result in harm or disappearance almost always involve people who were alone, even briefly. Stay on marked trails. The areas where problems concentrate are typically off the main paths. If you feel an urge to leave the trail, to explore an unmarked area, to follow something you cannot see, resist that urge. Do not linger in the saddle area on the northwestern face. Pass through quickly. Do not sit and rest there. Do not stop to admire the view. Pay attention to your equipment. If your compass begins behaving erratically, if your GPS loses signal, if your phone starts malfunctioning, take these as warning signs. Move to a different location. Trust your instincts. If you feel anxious, if you feel watched, if you feel an overwhelming urge to leave, listen to that feeling. Turn around. Go back the way you came. Tell someone your plans. before you hike, or let someone know where you are going and when you expect to return. If you do not check in as planned, they should contact park authorities. Be aware of the time. Incidents cluster in the late afternoon and evening hours, between 4 and 7 in the evening. Plan your hikes to be off the mountain before this window if possible. And if you hear something calling your name, if you hear voices from inside the rocks, if you see someone on the trail who does not acknowledge your presence and vanishes when you look away, do not investigate, do not follow, do not respond. Keep walking, get off the mountain, and do not go back. The rescuers who found the hiker on Christmas night did not include these details in their official report. They documented a successful rescue of a lost hiker with no injuries. They noted that the subject was confused about how he had become lost. They did not note what he said about the voices. But I spoke with one of the rescue team members during my research, off the record, without attribution. He told me that cases like this are not unusual on Grandfather Mountain. He told me that hikers frequently report experiences they cannot explain. He told me that the rescue teams have learned not to ask too many questions because the answers are never satisfying. He told me that some members of the rescue squad refuse to go to certain areas of the mountain, unless absolutely necessary. He told me that dogs trained for search and rescue sometimes will not work in those areas, that they sit down and refuse to move, that they whine and tremble and have to be carried out. He told me that the official reports do not capture what really happens on that mountain. And he told me one more thing. He told me that the hiker they rescued on Christmas night, the one who lost 5 hours and heard voices calling his name, came back to the ranger station 3 weeks later with a question. He wanted to know how to find the place where he had been standing, the clearing where they found him, the location where the voices had called to him. He wanted to go back. The ranger who spoke with him strongly advised against this. He said the hiker seemed confused but insistent. He said the hiker described feeling like he had left something behind in that clearing, like something was still there, waiting for him to return. The ranger does not know whether the hiker ever went back. He does not know what happened next, but he fears the worst. Because the mountain calls to people, it gets inside their heads. It makes them want to return, to find what they lost, to answer the voices that spoke their names. And the ones who go back, the ones who return to the places where they should not go, they do not always come out again. Grandfather Mountain has been a state park since 2009, when it was purchased from private ownership. Before that, it was operated as a private tourist attraction for decades, with the mile-high swinging bridge as its main draw. In the years since the state took over, visitation has increased. More trails have been developed. More facilities have been built. More people come to the mountain every year. More people means more incidents, more lost hikers, more strange experiences, more questions without answers. The Park Service does its best to manage these situations. They maintain the trails. They post warning signs. They respond quickly when someone goes missing. They bring people home whenever possible. But they cannot control the mountain itself. They cannot change the geology that has been here for 1 billion years. They cannot silence the sounds that come from inside the rocks. They cannot close the areas where the phenomena concentrate, not without shutting down most of the park. So they manage, they respond, they rescue who they can, and they do not talk publicly about what they have seen. I began this investigation hoping to find answers. I end it with more questions than I started with. What is happening on Grandfather Mountain? Why do people lose time there? Why do they make decisions they cannot explain? Why do they disappear? I do not know. I know that the geology is unusual. I know that magnetic anomalies have been documented. I know that the Cherokee warned their people to avoid certain places on this mountain. I know that people continue to have experiences they cannot explain. I know that some of those people do not come back. I know that Francis Apperson has been missing for nearly 4 years. I know that Freddie Morgan died on an easy trail in good weather. I know that Todd Buckman fell from a location where falls should not occur. I know that somewhere on that mountain, in the saddle between ancient ridges, something waits. I do not know what it is. but I know it is real. The mountain rises against the Carolina sky, nearly 6,000 feet of ancient rock and forest and mystery. The mile-high swinging bridge spans between peaks, carrying tourists who will never know the history beneath their feet. The trails wind through ecosystems found nowhere else on Earth. Rare species of plants and animals make their homes on these slopes. Scientists come to study the biodiversity. Hikers come to enjoy the views. Most of them return safely. Most of them have wonderful experiences. Most of them never encounter anything unusual, but some of them do. Some of them stop in the saddle and feel the pressure of being observed. Some of them hear their names called from inside the rocks. Some of them lose hours they cannot account for. Some of them walk off trails and into wilderness and never return. The Cherokee knew. They knew 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, longer. They knew which places to avoid and why. They knew what waited in the ancient stone. They tried to warn us, but we did not listen. And so the mountain continues to claim its price. A hiker here, a camper there, people who went into the wilderness and did not come out, people whose trails ended in the middle of nowhere, people whose stories have no endings. Francis Apperson is still missing. The search continues, but the mountain does not give back what it takes. There is one more detail I want to share. During my research, I obtained copies of incident reports from the Park Service through a Freedom of Information request. Most of these reports were routine: lost hikers found safely, minor injuries treated, weather-related evacuations. But one report stood out. It was dated 2017. A group of hikers reported finding something on the Profile Trail in the Saddle area that disturbed them enough to contact park authorities. They found a backpack. The backpack was sitting upright against a rock, as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Inside was a wallet with identification, a water bottle, snacks, a rain jacket, all the things a hiker would carry. The identification belonged to a man who had not been reported missing. He was not in any database of missing persons. His family had not contacted authorities about him. Rangers contacted the address on the identification. They reached a relative who said the man had gone hiking in the area 2 months earlier. He had not returned. They had assumed he had simply moved on without telling anyone. He was an adult. He was entitled to his privacy. But he had not moved on. His backpack was on the mountain. His belongings were inside. His body was never found. He was not added to the missing persons statistics because he was never officially reported missing. He was not included in the search and rescue tallies because there was no search and rescue operation. He simply ceased to exist, and no one knew to look for him until his backpack was found by strangers 2 months after he vanished. How many others are there like him? How many people have disappeared in these mountains without anyone knowing to look for them? How many backpacks sit against rocks in remote areas, waiting to be discovered? We do not know. The mountain knows, but the mountain is not talking. This investigation has taken me through hundreds of documents, dozens of interviews, and multiple visits to Grandfather Mountain and the surrounding area. I have learned more about Appalachian geology than I ever expected. I have learned more about Cherokee history and oral tradition. I have learned more about search and rescue operations and missing persons investigations. But I have not learned what is happening on that mountain. The evidence points to something unusual, something that affects human cognition and behavior, something that causes people to lose time, to make inexplicable decisions, to wander into wilderness from which they do not return. The scientific hypotheses I have presented, magnetic anomalies, infrasound, electromagnetic effects on brain function, may explain part of what is happening, but they do not explain all of it. There is something more, something that the Cherokee knew about and warned their people to avoid, something that has been waiting in the ancient rocks for longer than human beings have existed, something that calls to us sometimes, that whispers our names, that invites us to come closer, to step off the trail, to walk into the darkness between the stones. Most of us do not hear it, but some of us do, and some of those who hear it, who follow it, who answer when it calls, they do not come back. The hiker they rescued on Christmas night wanted to return. He wanted to find the clearing again, to hear the voices again, to remember what he could not remember. I do not know if he went back, but if he did, I fear for him. Because the mountain calls to those it has touched. It plants something in their minds, a seed of longing, a need to return. It makes them forget the fear they felt. It makes them remember only the calling, only the voices, only the pull toward the ancient stone. And those who follow that pull do not always return. Frances Apperson drove to a location she had not planned to visit. Did something call to her? Did she hear something on that drive through the mountains that made her change course? We do not know. We will probably never know. But the pattern suggests that the mountain's influence extends beyond the boundary of the park. It reaches into the surrounding wilderness. It reaches into the minds of those who come too close. And once it has touched you, it does not let go. The sun sets over Grandfather Mountain. The ancient rocks catch the last light, glowing red and orange against the darkening sky. The mile-high swinging bridge sways gently in the evening breeze. The tourists head back to their cars, tired and happy. Photographs on their phones, memories that will last a lifetime. Most of them will return to their normal lives. Most of them will tell their friends about the beautiful view. Most of them will never think about Grandfather Mountain again. But some of them will remember something else, a feeling they cannot name, a sound they cannot identify, a sense that something was watching them from behind the rocks. They will try to forget. They will tell themselves it was their imagination, a trick of the light, exhaustion after a long hike. But in the quiet moments, late at night, they will remember, and they will wonder. What was watching? What did it want? And why did they feel, for just a moment, the overwhelming urge to leave the trail and walk into the forest and never look back? The investigation continues. Frances Apperson is still missing. Freddie Morgan's death is still unexplained. The trails remain open, though some sections are closed for reasons that have not been fully explained. The hikers continue to come, hundreds of thousands every year. Most of them return safely. Most of them have wonderful experiences, but some of them do not, and the mountain continues to keep its secrets. It has been keeping them for 1 billion years. It will keep them 1 billion more. If you have information about any of the cases mentioned in this investigation, contact the appropriate law enforcement agency. The Avery County Sheriff's Office handles cases on Grandfather Mountain itself. The Burke County Sheriff's Office handles cases in the Linville Gorge area. The National Park Service handles cases on the Blue Ridge Parkway. These agencies are doing their best with limited resources. Any information, however small it may seem, could help bring answers to families who have waited years for closure. Frances Apperson's family is still waiting. They deserve answers. We all deserve answers. But the mountain is not answering. It never has. Stay safe on Grandfather Mountain. Stay together. Stay on the trails. And if something calls your name from inside the rocks, do not answer. Do not follow. Keep walking. Because once you stop, once you turn toward the voice, once you take that first step off the marked path, you may never find your way back. The mountain is patient. It has been waiting for 1 billion years. It can wait for you. Do not give it the chance. There is a coda to the story of the Christmas hiker. The day after he visited the ranger station asking how to find the clearing, he returned to Grandfather Mountain. He did not tell anyone he was going. He drove up alone on a Tuesday morning in mid-January, when the park was nearly empty, when the winter trails were cold and quiet. He signed the register at the trailhead. He wrote his name and the date and his intended destination. He wrote that he planned to hike the profile trail to the saddle and back. He never returned. A ranger found his car in the parking lot 2 days later. The registration was checked. They found his previous rescue on file. They understood immediately what had happened. Search and rescue deployed for the second time in less than a month for the same person. They searched the profile trail. They searched the saddle area. They searched every possible route he could have taken. They found his backpack. It was in the saddle, sitting upright against a rock, exactly as the backpack from 2017 had been found. Inside was his wallet, his phone, his water bottles, everything he had carried with him. His phone had no signal, but it had recorded audio. The phone had been set to voice memo mode. Whether he had activated it deliberately or accidentally, no one knows. The recording was 53 minutes long. It began with the sounds of hiking, footsteps on rock, heavy breathing, the rustle of a jacket against a backpack strap, wind in the trees, the occasional grunt of exertion on a steep section. Then the footsteps stopped. For approximately 30 seconds, there was silence. Not the normal silence of a forest. Complete silence. No wind, no birds, no insects, nothing. Then a voice. Not his voice. A different voice. Lower, clearer than it should have been, given the ambient conditions on the mountain. The voice said his name. It said it 3 times. Slowly, distinctly, as if calling to someone from a great distance. Then the recording ended. 53 minutes of audio, and no indication that he had ever responded or spoken again after that voice called his name. The search continued for 2 weeks. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters flew patterns over the wilderness. Volunteers hiked every accessible trail. He was not found. His case was added to the files. Another missing person on Grandfather Mountain. Another family waiting for answers that will probably never come. Another person who heard the voices and followed them. I debated whether to include this story in the investigation. The hiker's family requested privacy. They asked that his name not be used, that the details remain vague. I have honored their request, but I felt the story needed to be told, even in this limited form, because it illustrates something important. The mountain does not just take people at random. It calls to them. It plants something in their minds. It makes them want to return. And those who return, those who answer the call, they do not come back. This is not superstition. This is pattern recognition. This is the same pattern that the Cherokee observed over centuries. This is the same pattern that has repeated on this mountain for as long as anyone has been keeping records. The mountain calls. People answer. People disappear. Over and over and over again. The geological surveys continue. Scientists return to Grandfather Mountain every few years to take new measurements, to update their understanding of the magnetic anomalies, to study the unusual properties of the ancient rock. Each survey confirms what the previous surveys found. The mountain is unusual. The magnetic fields are stronger than they should be. The rock formations create acoustic conditions that do not exist elsewhere. But no survey has explained why people disappear. No survey has explained the voices. No survey has explained why search dogs refuse to work in certain areas, why experienced hikers become hopelessly lost on marked trails, why people who should know better walk into wilderness from which they do not return. The science describes the symptoms. It does not identify the cause. And until it does, the mysteries will continue. I want to end with a story that is not about disappearance. A story about someone who went to Grandfather Mountain, encountered something unusual, and came back to tell about it. In 2021, a woman was hiking alone on the Daniel Boone Scout Trail, one of the more remote paths on the mountain. She was an experienced hiker, 47 years old, with decades of backcountry experience. She was descending from the summit in late afternoon when she noticed something strange. The forest had gone quiet. She stopped walking and listened. No birds, no insects, no wind in the trees. Complete, absolute silence. She had hiked hundreds of trails over 20 years. She had never experienced silence like this. Then she heard the footsteps. Someone was walking behind her on the trail. The footsteps were clear, distinct, unmistakably human. Boot on rock. The crunch of gravel. The rhythm of someone walking at a steady, deliberate pace. Someone who knew exactly where they were going. She turned to see who it was. There was no one there. The trail behind her was empty. She could see for 100 yards through the forest, down the path she had just climbed. The late afternoon light filtered through the trees. Every rock and root was visible. There was no other hiker. There was no one at all. But the footsteps continued. They were getting closer. She did not run. She is proud of that. She did not panic. She turned back around and began walking again, faster than before, but not running. The footsteps behind her matched her pace. When she sped up, they sped up. When she slowed down, they slowed down. For approximately 15 minutes, she hiked down the trail with invisible footsteps following behind her. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The birds started singing again. The insects resumed their buzzing. The wind rustled through the leaves. The normal sounds of the forest returned. She looked behind her one more time. Still no one. She completed her hike without further incident. She drove home. She did not tell anyone about the experience for several months. When she finally told a friend, the friend laughed it off. An animal, probably. A deer walking parallel to the trail. An echo from another hiker somewhere else on the mountain. But she knew what she had heard. She knew how close the footsteps had been. She knew that whatever was following her had been on the trail itself, not in the forest beside it. And she knew that when she turned around, when she looked directly at where the footsteps were coming from, there was nothing there. She has not returned to Grandfather Mountain. She has no intention of returning, but she thinks about it. She wonders what was following her. She wonders what would have happened if she had stopped walking, if she had waited for the footsteps to catch up, if she had turned around one more time. She does not want to know the answer. The Cherokee called it Tanawha, the guardian, the watcher. They did not mean it as a comforting name. Guardians can be protective, but they can also be territorial. They can also be dangerous. The Cherokee knew that certain places on the mountain were not for humans. They knew that something lived there, or existed there, or watched there. They knew that people who entered those places did not always come out. This knowledge was not superstition. It was wisdom accumulated over 1,000 years of living with the mountain. It was practical survival information encoded in story and tradition. When the European settlers came, they dismissed this wisdom. They saw the mountain as property to be owned, resource to be exploited, view to be enjoyed. They did not understand that the mountain was not theirs to use. The mountain belongs to itself. It has belonged to itself for 1 billion years, and it will continue to belong to itself long after we are gone. This investigation is not meant to frighten people away from Grandfather Mountain. The mountain is beautiful. The trails are well maintained. The views are spectacular. The state park staff work hard to keep visitors safe. Most people who visit Grandfather Mountain have wonderful experiences. Most people hike the trails and take photographs, and go home with nothing more unusual than sore legs. But some people have different experiences, and a few people do not come home at all. I have documented what I have found. I have presented the evidence as objectively as I can. I have offered scientific hypotheses where they seem relevant and admitted ignorance where the evidence does not support conclusions. What you do with this information is up to you. If you choose to visit Grandfather Mountain, be careful. Follow the guidelines I have outlined. Stay with a companion. Stay on the trails. Do not linger in the areas where problems concentrate, and pay attention to what the mountain tells you. If you feel watched, you may be right. If you hear something calling your name, do not answer. If you feel an overwhelming urge to leave the trail and walk into the forest, resist. The mountain is patient. It has been waiting for 1 billion years. It does not need you specifically. It will wait for someone else. Do not be the one who answers its call. Frances Dell Apperson has been missing since May 17, 2022. Her car was found at Linville Falls, locked, with her belongings inside. Her scent trail ended approximately a quarter mile into the forest. She has not been seen since. If you have any information about Frances Apperson, contact the Burke County Sheriff's Office. Her family deserves answers. The mountain has kept its secrets long enough. The investigation continues. The questions remain. The mountain keeps its silence. And somewhere in the ancient rocks, in the saddle where the compass needles spin and the silence grows too deep, something continues to wait. It has been waiting since before humans existed. It will wait until after we are gone. It is patient. It does not need us. But sometimes it calls to us anyway, and sometimes we answer. That is when the trouble begins. Stay safe, stay together, stay on the trail, and do not answer when the mountain calls your name.